right, Barry, you're starting us off. Oh, Ron is?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ron Reichen. I'm with Precision Body and Paint in Beaverton, Oregon. I'm associated here with my colleagues. They're going to introduce themselves, and we're going to have a discussion today concerning the difference between an estimate and a repair plan. And let's start with gentleman to my right.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Barry Dorn with Dorn's Body and Paint in Richmond, Virginia.
And I'm Michael Giarizzo, DCR Systems, SCRS board member.
Rob Grieve, proud owner of Nyland's Collision and right outside Denver, Colorado.
Michael, let's hit it off. Your organization has created some pretty innovative ideas in how we do damage analysis on the latest technology on these new vehicles. So give us just a slight overview on how you go about that.
Yeah, so first of all, we really got our people involved and whiteboarded what would need to be if you only had one chance to actually write that repair plan. If you had to capture everything one time and document it. And so things like strategic disassembly, a lot of OE research, a lot of collaboration, and understanding what vehicle you're working on and all the details around it, all came to the surface to create what we call a repair plan.
Rob, tell us a little bit about how you interpret the difference between an estimate and a repair plan.
Okay, so estimates in my mind are dead. They're basically useless other than for setting up reserves for an insurance company. A repair plan or blueprint, on the other hand, is a much more thorough look at what's going to have to be done to the vehicle. And, you know, for the consumer, it's far more relevant and important. The repair plan, if you will, it's today it needs to tell a story, and it needs to tell its own story in kind of language a consumer can understand. I recently had my roof need to be replaced, and I looked at the estimate that was given to me from my insurance company. I couldn't tell you what one line meant. You go right to the bottom line, right? Today, with insurance or with third-party payers pushing back on some of the technologies that are involved in these cars, you need to have the line notes and the procedures and all the rest of that in there so that the consumer can understand why your number is so much different than what the insurance company's is, and get them to start advocating for you.
Great. Barry, tell us a little bit about the transition that Dorn's made in their evolution of moving from an estimate to a repair plan or to the damage analysis.
Yeah, so what we've seen is that consumers, they are confused from the beginning. And you add a huge layer of complexity when you add an estimate, a traditional estimate, and what that looks like. And you know, we've used examples in the past of where we get an estimate from a carrier, and the consumer does actually, and then you know that repair plan or that estimate is at one value, and then we start down in the process, and it can be 200 or 300% over what was initially wrote, and that creates two things. It creates confusion and it creates distrust with the consumer. They know someone's lying to them, they just don't know who yet.
Amen.
And so what we've done is very similar to what these gentlemen here have done. We now use software, and we use software. The first software that we're going to use is the OE procedure, period. And then the next step, just to be candid, what we do at our own facility is we utilize a program such as the BOT, the Blueprint Optimization Tool. That creates consistency across the board. That's consistency not just from a billing structure, but from a technician standpoint. The technician knows there's one way to do things. We outline everything that technician has to do, so that way they know. It's clear, it's crystal clear what they have to do. But from a documentation side, I still feel like that I'm speaking of my facility, that we have room to grow on that. And I know Michael you've got one, I'll be blunt, you've got one hell of a program that you utilize. So I'd like to hear a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so we approach it from the standpoint when we're writing the vehicle that what's written is going to be then translated to a set of work instructions. So it's got to be all inclusive, right? They say an estimate never fixed a car, and hence a repair plan is the plan that the technicians will follow. So if you're doing all that research and the documentation around every detail that needs to be done to that vehicle, then in a sense it becomes non-negotiable from a line item standpoint. Now pricing is a different discussion, but that is a set of work instructions that we're expecting our technicians to follow to the T to put a safe and proper repair back on the road. Now we've developed some software in-house to help document that in sequence of the way the repair plan is written to make it easier for the bill payer or the carrier to understand. But the main point is that everything that we put into that repair plan, again, becomes a work instruction. So if something is missing, it's not going to get performed on the vehicle.
You know, Michael, what I'm gathering from our conversation is it really starts with transparency and communication and how critical that is. And it seems like the communication portion of it in many cases, and the transparency as well, kind of gets lost when we have multiple players that are involved in that claims process. Rob, talk to us a little bit about how your organization manages that.
Well, let me take that just a little bit different direction first, in that the repair plan is exactly that. It's a plan, and there's a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration when fixing the car. Just like if you're planning a gigantic party or something, there's different parts that have to be put together in order to make it successful. We have to take into consideration wheel alignments, calibrations that may be needed, special order parts. This car may move to several different places throughout the shop, and it may be 15 different people working on the car. That all has to be put into a document that tells a story, not just for the consumer, the insurer, but everybody in the shop working on the vehicle as well. And so, you know, once you put that together, it's very easy to explain to anybody in the process, whether it's a consumer, an insurer, or an employee.
Barry, give us some ground root basis on how you start setting that expectation with the customer at the first point of contact.
Sure. So we explained to them again that they have received an estimate from a third-party payer. That's the case in most cases. And we explained to them that the vehicle is going to go through a triage where we're going to identify that damage, because at our facility that we use both repair planners, that we don't have estimators. We use the repair planners, but we also use our blueprint team. In our blueprint team, they can't start an estimate until they've pulled the DOE, the procedures first. That's critical, because how do you write a repair plan and not look at the procedures first? Because you don't know what you're doing until you go through that. So our team, it's a 4-step process. And so it doesn't just reside with one person or one group. It resides with multiple groups before it becomes a blueprint. Because as at Air Store, we get the blueprint, and then once the blueprint is finalized, in our opinion, that becomes a vetted repair plan. Now that could take, in most cases, hours. I'm not aware of no one, and you guys can maybe bring more to that, but I'm not aware of no one or no group that can turn a vetted repair plan out in 20 minutes or 15 minutes. I'm sorry. In my world, or at least at Air Store, it is physically impossible.
Gotcha. You know, as we get into this, and I've said this, you know, many times over the years, that our industry is no longer a trade; it's a skilled profession. And when we have that first point of contact with a client that doesn't understand all of the technology, they see and they benefit from lane departure and blind spot monitoring and adaptive cruise control and auto braking and all of those other things. Michael, tell us a little bit about your communication structure, so you don't get the deer in the headlights with the customer, but yet you still let them know how deep you're going to have to get into this vehicle and the importance of that.
Yeah, so today it's a really a very different ball game where, you know, we're not a commodity as an industry. There's never been more variability in the capability of shops out there ever in history. And we'll talk to the customers about the importance of their right of choice and the importance of how a safe and proper repair is done. You know, I'll date myself when I remember when a bad repair was just ugly.
Yeah.
The fender or the quarter panel had waves in it, or the color didn't match, but nobody got hurt. And today we're talking about safety machines on wheels. And we talked to the customer about, you know, there's many ways to repair cars today, but only one correct way. And as an industry, we've got to embrace that there is only one way to repair a car today, and that's one that's guided by the manufacturer. So if we believe that, then as you mentioned before, Ron, then we must be completely transparent in all of our repairs. And we'll talk to the customer about that they're going to get all the documentation of not only what needed to be done, but what was actually done to the vehicle. You know, transparent world is a world that we're quickly approaching. It's going to be required in our industry so that safe cars can be on the road.
Yeah, good point. Rob, when you get into taking your clients on a field trip through your facility, talk to us a little bit about the communication you have when we're showing them a vehicle that's setting up on a frame machine, or you're doing a weld destruction test. You know, just share with us a little bit about how that dialogue goes.
Thanks for asking. That's a great question. We offer all of our guests the opportunity to have a tour of the shop. Greater than 50-60% of what we work on is Lexus and Toyota. So the people coming in for a repair plan are likely going to have a Lexus or a Toyota, and there'll be some vehicle inside the shop that is in a similar situation, just disassembled. So we can give them a look behind the curtain, so to speak. And you know, the importance of having a super clean shop and everybody friendly and all the rest of that, it means the world to them. And it's uncommon that shops would say, hey, do you want to take a walk through the shop and get to meet some of the people and see some of the processes? And the wow factor that it generates is absolutely amazing.
If you want to be treated like a professional, I think you first have to act like one. Barry, tell us a little bit about how you train your staff. How do you develop that conversation with your frontline people that are making that first point of contact, so that we can elevate our industry? We're no longer blacksmiths. You know, talk to us a little bit about that.
So in AirStore, we want our CSRs and our front desk folks to know as much as a repair planner and or estimator. So they actually go through the same courses, both internally and externally, that our repair planners and blueprinters did go through. We don't want a customer calling first. If a customer is calling us, there's a problem. We need to be proactive and call them. But two, if they are reaching out, we want them, whomever they get, to get the correct answers that they need from a knowledgeable individual, not someone that's just simply going to say, hey, well, hang on, I'll get someone for you. No. Now, this may be a point to where it could be a little bit overkill, but back to the point that we're all trying to make, it instills trust. It instills transparency, that all of us are on the same page as to what the execution process is to deliver their car back to them in the exact way that they anticipate that it will. But I got to say, to Rob's point, and Ron, I'll ask you, when a customer does come and they see your facility, as opposed to if they may have been somewhere else, it doesn't matter where, but they've been somewhere else, I'd like to know, what do you hear from customers and clients when they come and they tour your facilities and they've already been somewhere else? I'm curious to hear what what that feedback is.
Well, thanks for asking, Barry, but I want to back up just a little bit, and I think, you know, the old acronym, you only get one first impression. And so it really steps back into, is your parking lot well lit? Is it striped? Are there arrows directing the people to the office? When you go into the office, is the coffee fresh? Do the restrooms sparkle, or do they smell like the county fair restrooms? I mean, you know, you've got to take this into consideration. Would you want your wife or daughter coming into that facility? So, you know, if you want to demand respect, you first got to present yourself in a professional manner. And, you know, to key to that point, we start, and a lot of times they'll come in with an estimate from a photo-generated estimate from a carrier. And there's a lot of abbreviations and acronyms on that estimate. And so we start with having a conversation about what's this LKQ or Opt-OE or things like that, because you have to understand the average customer has a loss every 7 years. And we use these terms daily and hourly, but they don't. So I think, you know, having your CSRs trained and being able to say, well, that means that that's a part that has been salvaged off of another vehicle that was damaged, or this is a part that's maybe manufactured not by your car manufacturer, but it's coming from offshore. And then you get into it a little bit deeper. Is your car a leased car? Because if you get into the details of your lease agreement, there's, in the fine print, it says you are required to have that vehicle repaired at a factory certified facility with factory certified parts. And a lot of people don't realize that if that car was turned in after the end of their lease, they could have a financial obligation above and beyond the residual, because it's not their car to make that decision. So I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole, but that's kind of where I'm at. So.
Great point, Ron.
You know, there's so much information out there today, especially from the manufacturers, and as a certified repairer, we'll really use that as well when we're educating that customer. We have QR code that will take us to the different manufacturers' websites, where we can share on a screen and literally show them, you know, through the manufacturer's eyes, why certification and a certified repair is so important, and that right of choice has to be exercised. So, like Barry mentioned, we'll educate all of our people, you know, internally and externally, and utilize all the information that's out there so that they're fluent and they're confident in talking to the customer.
You know, one thing we see too is we have a much more educated client base than we used to. I think because of social media, because of the internet and Facebook and other things like that, you know, people are far more educated about their vehicle and the need for that certification and protecting their investment. Rob, speak to a little bit about how that conversation goes in your facility.
Let me say this.
I meant to, you know, to kind of key you up. I know you do a podcast on the weekends.
Yeah.
So you know, share just a little bit about that passion that you have that takes you to that realm.
Well, there's, you know, I do a weekly podcast on YouTube, and it is consumer focused. It is for consumers, and the reason I do it is to give them a look behind the curtain, so to speak, of what goes on, the players they're going to be introduced to, the potholes they may, you know, come across, the parts, and the importance of the right choices on those, and insurance policies with rental, get the most robust rental. I mean, we cover all sorts of different consumer-facing items to make them smarter from the backside of what's going on. And you're right, the consumers are much smarter, because when people are shopping for cars today, it may not be about the payment as much as the options that they're looking for. And it's very option oriented these days. I want a car that does this and has that and don't care about this, and so on and so forth. But I'm going to throw a question out to the three of you guys. We constantly are being told, whether it's by an insurer or a guest that's gone shopping to other shops, that we're far more expensive than everybody else. My retort to that is, were not more expensive, our repair plans are far more thorough to protect you and your passengers. And if you're not seeing these things on those other estimates, that's what's driving the bottom line number. What do you guys see in as far as that?
You know, there's clearly a bedside manner that you have to have, obviously, and we constantly have to kind of step back and put ourselves in that client's shoes.
Absolutely.
And say, you know, at the first point of contact, and if we know the brand, then we ask them, do you rely on your lane departure system? Do you rely on your backup camera? And if they say yes, and then we get into the details of why we're going to be recalibrating that vehicle and the need for that, so that we can assure that those features that, back to your point, Rob, why they bought that car in the first place. And we're going to make sure that those things function properly so that they don't back over the neighbor's kid on a tricycle, or they don't make that lane. You know, humanoids are creatures of habit. And when they rely on that lane departure, instead of looking in that mirror, they rely on that. And it doesn't take very many generations for that to become their habit. So if we don't, you know, rebuild that system on their vehicle and assure them that we've documented that it's going to perform again. So I guess that's part of that, setting it up, the expectation right at the first point of contact, you know, even to the point of, you know, tell us about the accident. Did you spill a mocha? Was there a child seat in the car? And talk about that. How many seat belts were in use? Maybe the car did a 360, and maybe the point of impact was the left front, but we really need to look at the right rear to see if that wheel impacted a curb or something like that. Or was the car parked when it had an impact? So showing that concern, you're drawing that information out, and it's a twofold situation, because you're also demonstrating to that vehicle owner that you're the professional. You're asking the right questions, just like when you go to your doctor.
I agree with that, because, and I learned from a very early age in the dealership worlds that I was living in, anytime you can educate the consumer about their vehicle or something that it has, whether it's radar compliant paint on the bumpers, or, you know, the blind spot monitors are changing, or any of that stuff, you now become the expert. And the bottom line number isn't so much important if they have trust that you really know their vehicle, and all of this is absolutely necessary.
I think if you also look at just simply from a consumer aspect, so Rob, to get to your question, so I'm going to assume this, so they've gotten other estimates from somewhere else, and you've written the repair plan. I think it's indicative of, okay, you know, for us, where the average one that we see from a third-party payer is right around nowadays about 25 lines or so. And then we consistently, with the software provider that we use, we consistently run over 400. So just simply explaining to them, okay, there's a reason why you got a 25-line estimate, and we're submitting back to you and your third-party payer a 400-plus line. Every single thing in here, you know, I know a lot of it's written weird, and a lot of it's not basically legible to the average consumer. But when you look at that, there's a big difference. There is a big difference just in simply the line count alone. But I would agree with everything you and both Ron said initially.
You know, it's important to qualify the customer as well and understand what's important to them, because if they're simply shopping price and they're going around shopping price, I know at our facility we're probably not the right place for them. You know, that estimate, quite frankly, you can make that estimate look the way whatever way you want it to look, and you can make the bottom line look the way you want it to look, with the disclosures of a preliminary visual report, and car needs to be disassembled and all that. So the estimate and shopping estimate today is quite meaningless. So we really get down to really what's important to them. And if a safe and proper repair, certified repair, is important to them, then we do our best to convince them that they have made the right choice, that their right of choice is important, and they need to exercise that.
So, Michael, what you're saying is you pre-qualify the customer, knowing what their expectations are and what they're looking for as an end result, and then you can, you know, I guess, craft your responses to give them those assurances that you're going to reconstruct that vehicle. So all of those safety systems and all of those convenience systems that they've become used to are going to be there. And then again, I guess if there's a client that is simply not looking for, if they're just shopping for price, then you can be respectful of not only their time but your time as well, and respectfully say this is probably not the right facility for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up in a world where Dad said, "Get the keys."
Right.
Every set. Right. And today it's a whole different ballgame. You really need to understand the customer and what's important to them. And certainly, if a safe and proper repair is important to them, then explain why this is the right facility to be at.
So my question, again, to the three of you, you all have OEM certifications, and that's a driving piece for the consumers. A lot of consumers want to go to an OEM certified place. But we all are kind of governed under a different set of rules than a shop that isn't OEM certified. Maybe you can talk to some of the things that we have to do that the manufacturer requires of us for that certification, that plaque on the wall, that your normal body shop isn't going to have on their estimate, and probably not going to have it on their estimate because they don't even know they need to do it.
You know, Rob, I think probably one of the biggest points that we talk about when we look at that vehicle in its first conception, and we're having that pre-qualification of the client, really to see if they're a good fit for us as well. But if there's any welding that's going to be performed on that, we talk about the weld destruction test, and we explain to them the need for that, and not to get overly technical, but also to get them to participate in the understanding of that, because at the end result is they're our customer. The bill payer sits outside of that, and that line for so many years has been very fuzzy and gray, and in a way we need to take our industry back, not being arrogant or not bloviating, but let them know that we are the professional. That plaque on the wall just didn't appear. The elves didn't bring it there last night. There's a lot of airline seats, there's a lot of classroom, the shop is full of a lot of specialized equipment, and our technicians go out for a lot of that training. So I think back to that certification, the difference between a certified repair and a non-certified repair has to do with not only the depth of the training, but also the way that the facility is equipped.
You know, I'll tag on to what you're saying, Ron, is that if you look at what we are required to do, both from an equipment, training, tooling, just from the equipment side, all of us have what we internally would think or would say is a redundant piece of equipment. Meaning, that we have 5 SPR guns, right? But there's a reason why we have 5. We didn't just elect to do it. There's different specifications that each one has, that each OEM has crash tested and shown that is the correct one to use for whatever level of repair. But I'm also staring at at one of my welding instructors too, who is pretty hard nosed, but he is that he is ingrained in me that, when you go to these classes and you have just an upwards of a 40% pass rate, not a 40% failure, but a 40% pass rate in some of these classes that I go to, because I still go with my technicians. I haven't repaired cars in 25 years, but I still go with my team. And these are some incredibly difficult, expensive, time-consuming, but very much well worth it. The thing that I would say to a consumer is that if a collision repair facility has not been through OEM training, has not done the 2-week-long classes, there is a big difference between that and you've just been doing collision repair for 25 years. That you learn so much because you're immersed in what that OEM is doing, that there is some level of crossover on both sides, that you could view that as another portion that you learn from other OEMs as well. But simply showing that, because the days of having a certification where it's only that you just pay a fee, that you get a stamp and you're good. That's not what these gentlemen and myself do. that we go through and we follow what we're told, because the main critical piece that repairers miss is the liability. The liability is on you. It is not on the third-party payer, regardless of what they did or didn't do. And if you don't do that, if you don't follow that, you will be in front of a judge and jury at some point, and you've got to be able to say, can I defend myself?
Well, Barry, this has been a great discussion with you gentlemen, and I think the conclusion that I'm drawing is that we cannot fix today's vehicles with a rock and a stick in a dungeon.
Yes, sir. Well said, Ron.
All right.
And estimates are dead. Repair planning is the way to go. That's what it has to be.
And the vehicle dictates the cost of repair.
That's
We
it.
simply are the ones that are gathering that information along with the OE procedures and things like that. So just to make a guess at an estimate is just nothing more than a guess. But doing repair analysis and letting that vehicle tell us, and each one is unique, each one is different. There are never two impacts that are the same. So, thanks for your time. We've had a good time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.